Hello, Avila Advantage Macroeconomics students. I hope everyone is doing okay and staying safe. These are times that we have to adjust a little bit, so hopefully um, by doing the social distancing, staying at home, we can nip the coronavirus in the bud. But obviously, from an economic standpoint, these are going to result in some significant changes to our economy. So the material that you're reading this week is very applicable. The hopes is that this will be short, but obviously, when restaurants are closing, bars are closing, stores are closing. This past week, we had a jump in unemployment claims to, I think it was almost 3.28 million additional individuals applied for unemployment. Before that, it was so interesting because just a month before we were at 3.5% unemployment, and I would not doubt that our employment is going to jump to 5 to 6% at the next report. So that's a huge impact in the number of people that are employed. Um, Luckily, there was a stimulus package passed, a very large one, and then hopefully individuals will be getting checks sometimes in May. They had that schedule based on your income and whether you were single or married and whether you had a child that was below the age, I think, of 16. You could get an additional $500. So these are examples of ways to try to shift the aggregate demand curve out to encourage consumption or to give people income in this temporary time period. But again, this is just temporary. It may benefit for a month, but if this coronavirus goes on for a prolonged period of time, we would probably be looking at a pretty severe recessionary period for our economy. So that really changes things. It doesn't mean that we won't go back to a normal standard at some point later, but it's just the time period involved. You think about after back in 2008, after the Great Recession, the subprime crisis, unemployment went up to almost 10%. But with this, when you're literally just shutting down stores and there's the potential of bankruptcy for many of these firms, not everyone can be bailed out. That can have significant ripple effects in the long term as people would have to retool their skills, or eventually that hopefully as a business would be expanded um, by the government or other areas, because you're really going to have to see a shift from the business investment, because business investment is going to decline right now. No business except it maybe some those that produce the mask or hand sanitizer or things that people want. You're going to see shifts, but that's going to be very small compared to the overall economy that are available jobs. So some interesting times, but hopefully our leaders are making some good decisions and they're applying and talking to the economist about what is the best thing to do. So, all right, for what to do this week, you're going to obviously going to be reading chapters 11 and 12. Make sure to wrap up everything from week 4. After week 4, we're already halfway done with this course. As I said, these courses move so quickly, so it's so imperative that you stay on top of things, do things early in the week. Don't wait till Sunday to do this stuff. So you're going to be pressed to get it all done on a Sunday. But for week 4, make sure to wrap up the exam, anything else outstanding for that week. And I should have that graded shortly by Monday or Tuesday. But for week 5, you're starting to get into the classical and Keynesian in chapter 12, a discussion of that. And at 12, you're going to look more at the what we call the multiplier effect, the marginal propensity to consume, marginal propensity to save. And you could almost think about it in chapter 12, it's working in reverse, because people are not consuming. But just to give you some of the highlights, and I encourage you to watch the videos out there. Khan, I think he does a good job explaining that. But, first from chapter 11, a classical approach or thought is like we have this, we would say, a vertical long-run aggregate supply curve. And the classical school of thought is, that there's pure competition, that wages and prices are flexible, and that things can adjust quickly. And if we're at the potential level of output, really, if there's any change in aggregate demand, all you're going to do is just push up the price level because you can only produce so much in that time period. But that makes assumptions. Now the Keynesian school and John Maynard Keynes, this was kind of after the Great Depression. The classical school would say, well, wages and prices will adjust. Well, John Maynard Keynes says, well, in the long run, we're all going to be dead. So it was kind of the idea after the Great Depression, we need to jump in, we need to do something now. And that's where you saw things like the New Deal, and the government said, here's a shovel, go dig a hole in a national park. We don't care if we need the hole, but you have a job. And that's something that may have to happen again, is that you would see that the government step in and almost create these jobs for individuals to provide those incomes and keep the economy going, because otherwise the standard of living of many individuals is going to decline quite a bit. You're just not going to have the income to go out and buy the basics, goods and necessities. So that is a concern, because that can definitely impact the welfare of many individuals in the United States. And how we would do that, it's unknown. But otherwise, you're going to have a prolonged period of time, like we did after 2008, where there were many individuals that did not have the incomes, and their standard of living went down significantly. Now, it took a while to get out of that. It took a while to get the stock market back. So that's what's going to be curious to see, is especially how the markets interpret things about the future. If it's a short pandemic, things will probably rebound very quickly. But if this goes on for a prolonged period of time, that's going to have probably significant ripple effects, and you're going to start to see very high unemployment rates, and it's going to take a while for the economy to just kind of match those jobs as they're created. But again, the government, the fiscal side, and the monetary side can help influence that, but to a degree. That's the thing. If you stop all these businesses, it's going to have ripple effects, and that's the big trade-off right now. But a lot of the doctors and everyone is saying, it's more important to make sure everybody's healthy and everything, because if you just quickly go back to trying to start stores up again and everything else, you're going to make everybody worse off by making everybody sick, and then you won't have an economy at all. So, all right, some of the things I want to make sure continue. I would look especially on chapter pages 242 and 244. They give some good examples there. The Keynesian kind of says, with that curve, there's opportunities to continue to produce. That kind of a horizontal aggregate supply curve, and I can continue to shift out the aggregate demand without really increasing prices. But at some point, it would get to a classical, and if you just kept on pushing aggregate demand, you would just have higher prices. But with this, when you think about a recessionary gap, and that's what we're going to likely have, is a recessionary gap. What we were capable of producing at one point, we are going to be well below that. That might be for, I said, a year, or it might be for extended years, just depending on what's going to happen here. But in chapter 12, and just a little bit about the aggregate demand curve, just to refresh on that. Khan talks about this video about this, why it looks the way it is. I think we haven't discussed micro in this class, and this is a macro class. So when you're looking at these aggregate demand, aggregate supply curves, it's a relative price level and the GDP on the horizontal axis. So they talk about things like the wealth effect. When the prices go down and your income stays the same, you're better off. So you're going to move along that aggregate demand curve. The interest rate and the effect, savings effect, we can look at that. That if interest rates go down, you're more likely to consume more. And that's what the Federal Reserve tried to do, to almost go down to 0% interest rate. But people still thinking in their head that I don't know whether I'm going to have a job next month. They're likely actually cutting back on consumption right now. So if the government does the stimulus check and people don't go out and spend the money, it's not going to really improve the economy. It's actually just going to probably continue to push interest rates lower, and you could actually end up with negative interest rates. That would be, the banks would start to charge you for the amount of money that you have in the account. And last is that FX effect. Talked about the price level is lower, interest rates go down. If the American goods are cheaper compared to foreign goods, so that it could increase the aggregate demand. So, but a lot of these chapters kind of review that aggregate demand curve shifts. Could be back to fiscal policy, monetary policy, but now we're looking more in terms of what is going to shift that aggregate supply curve. So that's what you would read about in this chapter. Or both these chapters. So, and they have those shifts again on that page 242. They kind of had some nice examples there. We'll look at that. Let's see if we get to that page there for you. Yeah, they kind of go through the shifts, like 241 to 242, but they give some examples, especially in that figure. Table 11.2 gives some of those examples. Discoveries of new raw materials, reduction in national trade barriers, increase the supply of labor. So, what could actually shift that aggregate supply curve out? Okay. Last thing I'll just wrap up, chapter 12, they talk about Say's law, and well, they actually kind of go into more into, I should say, chapter 11. They talk about Say's law, but this leads into chapter 12. But the idea that consumption plus savings equals disposable income. And we can do a little bit of algebra to rewrite that equation that says savings is now equal to disposable income minus consumption. So there's this kind of idea of like a balance. You have a certain amount of income. You have choices about whether I'm going to borrow or save. If you're spending more than what you have in income, you have a dis savings, but if you have more income and you're not consuming as much, you have savings. So there has to be a balance there. And then the last part of that chapter, and kind of leading all the way up to page 273 or figure 12.8, but this idea of the multiplier effect, and this is a way through fiscal policy. The multiplier is 1 over 1 minus the marginal propensity to consume or expend. So it basically says, I want to give you an example, like an economy. If I go in, I spend $1,000,000 in a particular economy, or let's even keep it simplified. Let's say it's just $100, and John produces a good, and it's worth $100. If I spend $100, and he decides to save, he now has that $100, and now he decides to save 20% of that, and spend 80% of that and save 20% of that. So now he's got $100. He's going to say, okay, in my pocket, I'm going to go ahead and put $20 in the bank. I'm going to spend $80. And now he takes that $80 and he's going to go spend it on some good that Susan made. So maybe there's some really nice cakes or something like that. So now Susan's going to say, I got $80. Okay, well, I'm going to save 20% of that, and I'm going to consume the difference. So if you took 80, multiply that $8, it's $216, so then we have $64. So that process keeps repeating in cycles. Like they talk about the multiplier effect when like a Big 12 tournament comes to town, or if there's an event like, the Super Bowl. It's a huge boost to the local economy. Where I went to graduate school at UCM in Warrensburg in the early 90s, and this is still the case. The Whiteman Air Force Base has a huge impact on the town of Warrensburg. The economic activity would decline significantly in that town if the Air Force Base was gone. So they send their Air Force men to go to school at UCM. They come into town, they shop there, they go to the movies there. So if you take that away, and that's kind of the concern right now in our general economy, is that it's working in reverse. You're not going through this multiplier process. So you'll learn more read about that. But again, this week, just stay on top of things. If you have questions, send me an email. But I'll try to get everything graded by Tuesday. But other than that, I want you to have a great week and stay safe out there. Thanks.